My father has been gone for 59 years. I was 23, he was 51. And there are things I wish I'd said to him when I was 30, things I didn't have the words for yet, things I only found decades later, long after he could hear them. I'm 82 now. I want to tell you what I wish I'd told him. I was 30 in 1972, married to Helen, 7 years by then. David was 5, Susan was 2. The business was young. I'd struck out on my own 3 years before, after my apprenticeship with Harold, and the work was steady, but the worry about it was constant. I was a young father, a young husband, a young tradesman, and my own father had been dead for 7 years already by the time I turned 30. 7 years of carrying him around in my head without ever getting to actually talk to him again. If I could sit down across from him now, not as the boy he raised, but as the man I'd become by 30, with a wife and 2 children and a trade of my own, here is what I'd want him to know. The first thing I'd tell him is that I understand now why he worked the way he did. When I was young, I resented it. My father worked at the paper mill in Millinocket from the time he was 18 until the year before he died. Long shifts, dangerous work, some of it. The machinery in those mills wasn't forgiving, and men lost fingers, lost worse, on a fairly regular basis. He came home tired in a way that left very little of him for the evening. He'd eat his supper. He'd sit in his chair. He'd be asleep by 9 most nights. As a boy, I wanted more of him than that. I wanted him to play catch with me the way I saw other fathers do. I wanted him to ask me about school, about my friends, about the things that filled up a boy's interior. He didn't ask much. He provided. He kept the roof on. He kept us fed. And I thought, as a boy and even into my 20s, that the providing and the asking were 2 different things, and that he'd chosen the providing and left out the asking, and that the choice said something about what he valued. By 30, with my own business just getting started, with the weight of providing for Helen and David and Susan sitting on my own shoulders for the first time in a serious way, I started to understand something I hadn't understood as a boy. The providing is not separate from the asking. The providing is a kind of asking. It's the question, what do you need, answered before the question is even spoken, every single day, for years, without complaint and without much credit. My father didn't ask me about my day because he didn't have anything left most evenings to ask with. The mill had taken it. The machinery, the noise, the danger, the physical cost of it. That had taken the part of him that might have sat down and asked a boy about his friends. I understand that now in a way I didn't at 30, though I was getting close. By 30, I was starting to feel my own version of it, the particular exhaustion of having given a day's labor to keep a family fed, and how little is left over for the evening. I wish I'd told him, "Pop, I understand now. I understand what the providing cost you. I'm sorry I thought it was a smaller thing than the asking. It wasn't smaller. It was just different, and it was hard in a way I couldn't see until I was doing my own version of it." I want to tell you about a specific evening that crystallized this for me, because the general understanding came slowly, but this particular evening sharpened it. I was 34. David was 9, Susan was 6. I'd had a hard week, a job that was running behind, a supplier who'd let me down, a crew member who'd quit without notice in the middle of a project. I came home on a Thursday evening more tired than I think I'd ever been. Not physically tired in the way a young man is tired after hard labor. Tired in the deeper way, the way that comes from carrying responsibility for other people's livelihoods, for a business that bore my name, for a family that depended on the business succeeding. David wanted to show me something he'd built with his blocks. He'd been working on it all afternoon, he told me, very proud. He wanted me to come look. I told him, "In a minute, son." I sat down in my chair. I closed my eyes for just a moment, just to gather myself before I went to look at the blocks. I fell asleep in the chair. For almost an hour. David's blocks were still on the living room floor when I woke up, but he'd gone to bed. Helen told me, gently, the next morning, that he'd waited as long as he could. I felt terrible about that for years. I still think about it sometimes. But what I understand now, what I started to understand that very week, actually, in the days after it happened, is that I had just done, in miniature, exactly what my father had done to me 1,000 times. I had given everything to the providing and had nothing left in that particular hour for the asking, for the showing up, for the blocks. And I understood, with a kind of sudden clarity that arrived almost as grief, that my father had probably felt exactly what I felt that Thursday evening. Not indifference to me. Exhaustion so complete that indifference and exhaustion looked the same from the outside, though they were entirely different on the inside. That was the moment, more than any abstract understanding, where I forgave my father for the evenings he'd fallen asleep in his chair while I waited with something I'd wanted to show him. Because I'd just done it myself, to my own son, and I knew now from the inside what it had actually been. My mother died when I was 19. Cancer, fast and brutal, the kind that takes someone in 8 months from diagnosis to gone. My father was 47 at the time. He'd been married to her for 22 years. He never talked about it. Not once, in the 4 years between her death and his own, did my father sit me down and talk about what losing her had done to him. He went to work the Monday after the funeral. He kept the house going, badly at first, until my sister and I took over most of the domestic work, but he kept it going. He never cried in front of me. He never said her name more than he had to. I was angry about that at 30. I had Helen. I had a marriage that was working, that had warmth in it, that had the kind of talking things through that my parents' marriage had never seemed to have, at least not in front of the children. And I judged my father, quietly, for the silence about my mother. I thought it meant he hadn't loved her enough to be undone by losing her. I thought a man who really loved his wife would have shown it more. I was wrong about that. I understand now, and I wish I'd understood it by 30, though I don't think I fully did until I was much older, until I lost Helen myself, that silence is not the same as absence of feeling. My father's silence about my mother was not evidence that he didn't grieve her. It was evidence that he didn't know how to grieve her in front of other people. He'd been raised, the way I was raised, the way most men of our particular formation were raised, to believe that grief was private business, that you carried it, that you didn't make other people manage your sorrow. I know now what that kind of silent carrying costs a man. I carried Helen's loss in a similar silence for longer than I should have, in the early years after she died. I understand finally what my father was doing all those evenings when he sat in his chair after my mother died and said nothing. He was grieving, as loudly internally as anyone has ever grieved. He just didn't have the language or the permission to do it where I could see it. I'd tell him, "Pop, I'm sorry I judged your silence as not caring. I know now it was the opposite. I know now what it costs to carry that much and say nothing about it. I forgive you. I wish you'd had someone to say it to. I wish I'd been able to be that person. But I was 19, and then 23, and then you were gone, and I never got the chance." The third thing I'd tell him is something about the apartment. When I was 22, just before I married Helen, I rented a small apartment in Bangor, the first place that was entirely mine, not my parents' house, not a room I shared with my sister. My father came over one Sunday to help me with some repairs the landlord wasn't going to make. We worked for a couple of hours. He had a beer afterward. He told me the work looked good. That was the last time I saw him. 2 days later, a Tuesday, he had the heart attack at the mill, and he was gone before the ambulance even got him to the hospital. I've turned that Sunday over more times than I can count in 59 years. The last conversation, the last time I heard his voice, and what I remember most clearly, more clearly than anything else from that day, is that he said the work looked good. At the time, at 22, I took it as a simple compliment, a father noting that his son had done a competent repair. By 30, with my own son growing up and my own business establishing itself, I started to understand it differently. My father did not give compliments easily. In 22 years of being his son, I could count on one hand the number of times he'd told me something I'd done was good. Not because he didn't think things I did were good, I understand that now, but because praise, like grief, like most things that came from the interior, was not a currency he'd been taught to spend freely. The work looked good was, in the language my father had available to him, an enormous statement. It was, I believe now, his way of saying, "You're going to be all right. You've learned what you need to know. I can see myself in what you've built here, in this small apartment with its slightly crooked door now properly hung. I'm proud of you." I didn't hear all of that in it at 22. By 30, I was starting to. By 82, I hear it completely. Every time I think about that Sunday. I'd tell him, "Pop, I heard you." Eventually. It took me a while, but I heard what you were actually saying. Thank you for saying it, even in the small way you knew how to say it. It mattered more than you could have known, and more than I understood at the time. The fourth thing I'd tell him is about the way I raised my own children, and how much of it was a response to him, sometimes copying him, sometimes correcting him, and how long it took me to understand which was which. By 30, I had decided, mostly without examining it closely, that I was going to be a different kind of father than mine had been. More present, more verbal, more willing to ask my children about their interior lives instead of just providing for their material ones. And in some ways, I was. I asked David about school. I asked Susan about her friends. I tried to be in the room with them in a way my father had rarely managed to be in the room with me. But here's what I'd tell him now, at 82, looking back at the man I was at 30 trying to correct for his father's absence. I copied more of him than I knew. I worked long hours the way he had. I came home tired the way he had. I had years, a decade, maybe more, in the middle of my own children's growing up, where the providing crowded out the asking, exactly the way it had with him. I became, in significant ways, the father I judged him for being, even while I was telling myself I was doing it differently. I wish I could tell my father, "Pop, I understand you so much better now, because I became you in ways I didn't expect. The mill was my crew and my business and the demands of 45 years in the trades. The silence I judged in you, I practiced myself, with Helen, in 1985, in a year when I should have been talking, and instead I just worked harder and hoped the working would say what I couldn't." I'd want him to know that I see now how hard it actually is, not just to provide, but to provide and ask both, to be the breadwinner and the present father at the same time, to give everything to the work and still have something left for the evening. I judged him for falling short of an impossible standard, and then I fell short of it myself, in my own way, for my own reasons, and only later understood how much harder the thing actually is than it looks from the outside, from the perspective of a son who hasn't yet had to try it himself. I want to give you one more piece of this because it goes somewhere I didn't expect when I started thinking about it. David, when he was around 30 himself, about 25 years ago now, said something to me that landed the way certain things land only once in a lifetime. We were having one of the rare, honest conversations we managed to have in those years, and he said, "Pop, I used to think you worked too much because the work mattered more to you than we did. Now that I'm working this much myself, with my own kids, I understand it wasn't that. It was that you didn't know how to do both. Nobody taught you how. Nobody taught you how." I sat with that sentence for a long time, because it was true of me, and it had been true of my father before me, and probably true of his father before that, going back through generations of men who'd been raised to provide and never shown how to also be present, who had inherited a model of fatherhood that was one-dimensional and had no idea, because nobody had ever shown them, that there was a different way to do it. I didn't choose to be limited that way. My father didn't choose it either. We were both doing what we'd been given, the best we knew how, with tools that were incomplete because nobody had handed us the rest of the toolkit. That doesn't erase the cost. David still went to bed with his blocks on the floor, still grew up with a father who was often present in body and absent in attention. But it changes how I hold the inheritance. I'm not the first link in a chain of failure. I'm one link in a long chain of men doing their best with insufficient instruction, each one passing slightly more forward than they received, slowly, generation by generation, until somewhere down the line, in David, I hope, and in his own son, the chain finally holds the way it was always supposed to. I'd tell my father, "Pop, neither of us invented this. We both inherited it. And I think, in your own way, you were trying to break it too, even if you didn't have the words for trying. Even if, from where I stood as a boy, it just looked like silence and long hours. I think you were doing more than I gave you credit for." This is the simplest of the 7 things, and maybe the most painful, because it's the one that has no remedy. It's just a fact I have to live with. I know almost nothing about my father's interior life. I don't know what he was afraid of. I don't know what he'd hoped for as a young man, before the mill and the marriage and the children settled the shape of his life into what it became. I don't know if he loved my mother the way I came to love Helen, completely, with the particular ache of having found the right person, or if their marriage had been more practical than that, the way some marriages of that generation were. I don't know what he thought about, in the quiet moments, about his own father, about his own childhood, about whether he felt he'd lived the life he wanted, or some other life that had simply happened to him. I didn't ask. At 20, at 22, I didn't think to ask. Fathers, in my experience growing up, weren't asked. They were observed. You learned them by watching, not by inquiring. And by the time I was old enough to understand that asking might have given me access to something I couldn't get by watching alone, he was already gone. I think about this every time one of my grandchildren asks me something real. Lily asking what I was like at 18. David Jr. asking about my own grandfather, the one who came from Quebec, who I knew even less about than I knew about my own father. Every time they ask, I feel the particular grief of a question that was never asked of the man who could have answered it. I'd tell my father, "Pop, I'm sorry I never asked you who you were. Not what you did. I knew what you did. I watched you do it for 22 years. But who you were, underneath the doing. I didn't ask, and now I'll never know. And that not knowing is one of the few genuinely permanent losses in a life that has had a great many losses in it. Most things you can recover from, or find a different shape for. This one, I can't." The door closed in 1965, and it's never going to open again. I want to tell you about the few fragments I do have, because they're precious to me precisely because there are so few of them, and because looking at how little I have makes the loss of the rest more vivid. My mother told me once, this was after my father died, in one of the rare conversations we had about him in her last years, that he'd wanted to be a mechanic before the mill took him on. That as a young man, before he married her, he'd had some idea of working on engines, on machines with moving parts that you could understand and fix and improve. The mill had taken him because the mill was steady work, and a young man starting a family needed steady work, and the mechanic idea had simply stopped, the way so many young men's first ideas stop, overtaken by the practical necessity of providing. I think about that sometimes, about my father at 19 or 20, with some different version of himself in mind, before the version that became fixed. Paper mill, marriage, 2 children, the particular silence I grew up inside of. What would he have been? The mechanic version. Would he have talked more, in a trade that required less brute endurance and maybe left more of him available in the evenings? Would he have been a different father if the engines had worked out instead of the mill? I'll never know. That's a question that belongs entirely to a man who's been dead for almost 60 years. And the question died with him, mostly. I have one second-hand fragment of it, filtered through my mother's memory and then through mine, 50 years removed from the original telling. That's what not asking costs you. Not the big things. I knew the big things, the facts of his life, the shape of what he did and when. What I lost is the texture, the interior weather. The young man before the mill fixed him into the shape I knew, the hopes he'd had that didn't survive into the life I witnessed. I've tried to do better with this in my own old age, When the grandchildren ask me things, I try to answer fully, even the uncomfortable parts, even the parts that would be easier to deflect. Because I know now what the silence costs the person left holding the absence. I know it costs nearly 60 years of wondering what your own father wanted to be before the mill, before the marriage, before he became simply your father and stopped, in your eyes, being a separate person with his own unfulfilled directions. November of 1967, 2 years after my father died. I held my son in the hospital corridor in the early morning snow, and I had this overwhelming wish, sudden, physical, almost painful, that my father could be there, that he could see this, that there could be a moment where the man who'd made me a man could meet the boy who would make me a father. It didn't happen, of course. He'd been dead 2 years by then. But standing in that corridor, I made a kind of promise to him, even though he couldn't hear it. I said in my head something like, "Pop, I'm going to do this differently. I'm going to be different with this boy than you were with me." I've already told you that I didn't entirely keep that promise, that I became more like him than I expected to, in ways both good and difficult. But I want to tell him something else now, 57 years after that morning in the hospital corridor. I want to tell him, "Pop, David turned out well. He's 58 now. He's an engineer. He has 2 children of his own. He calls me every Sunday, and he tells me he loves me, and I tell him back, and neither of us has trouble saying it anymore, though it took us both a long time to get there. Whatever I did right with him, and I did some things right, even amid the things I did wrong, some of that came from you, from watching you, from the things you did manage to give me, even in your silence, even in your long hours at the mill. The reliability, the showing up, even tired, even with little left to give. David has that from me, and I have it from you. It runs through us. The good parts run through, even when we're trying hardest to leave the bad parts behind. I think you'd be proud of him, Pop. I think in your quiet way, you'd have found something true to say about him, the way you found something true to say about my apartment that Sunday. The work looks good. I think you'd have said that about the life he's built. The 7th thing, the last thing, the one I've saved because it's the hardest, is that I wish I'd told him I loved him. I never said it. Not once as a grown man. We weren't a family that said it. The closest I came was something like, "See you later, Pop," or "Thanks for your help," said on the Sunday in the apartment 2 days before he died. Words that meant something close to love, but that stopped short of the actual word. I've thought about why for 59 years now. Part of it was the formation, the code we were both raised in, where love was shown rather than spoken, where saying it out loud felt almost embarrassing, like admitting to something that should have been obvious and therefore didn't need stating. Part of it was simply habit. We'd never said it, so there was no established moment where saying it would have felt natural rather than strange. But mostly, I think, it was fear. The fear of the strangeness. The fear that saying it would create an awkward silence, that he wouldn't know how to receive it, that the moment would become heavier than either of us wanted it to be. So I never said it. And then he was gone, and the chance for it to ever feel natural was gone with him. When I had my own son, I made sure, eventually, though it took me longer than it should have, that the words got said. "I love you, son." I say it to David now, at the end of every call. He says it back. It's ordinary between us now, the way it should have been ordinary between my father and me. But I never said it to him. And that is the central regret of my life. More than the missed graduation, more than the Christmas Eve I came home too late, more than any of the other things I've talked about in other conversations. This is the one underneath all the others. I never told my father I loved him, and now I never will. And the not having said it is a small, permanent wound that 59 years has not closed. I'd tell him now, if I could. I'd say it plainly, the way I've learned to say things plainly in my old age. Pop, I loved you. I love you still, in whatever way a man can love someone who has been gone almost 6 decades. I think about you more than you'd probably expect. I see you in the mirror some mornings, Your forehead, your jaw, the particular way the skin sits around the eyes. I see you in my hands when I'm working a piece of wood, because some of what you knew, you passed down without either of us realizing it was happening. I see you in David, in the reliability he has, in the way he shows up no matter what. I love you, Pop. I should have said it on that Sunday, with the door properly hung and the beer in your hand, and the words, "The work looks good," still hanging in the air between us. I should have said it instead of, or alongside, "See you later." I didn't know it would be the last chance. Nobody ever does. That's the cruelty of it. You don't get a sign, a notice, a final warning that says, "This is the conversation. Say the important thing now." You just live the ordinary Sunday, and it turns out 2 days later to have been the only Sunday left. I want to tell you about something that happened more recently, about 3 years ago, that connects to this in a way I didn't expect when it happened. I was at the cemetery in Millinocket where my father is buried, beside my mother. I don't go often, once a year maybe, around the anniversary of his death. But I'd gone that particular October, and I was standing at the stone, and I found myself talking to him the way I sometimes talk to Helen. Out loud, quietly, in the empty cemetery with nobody around to hear. And I said it. I said, out loud, to a stone with his name on it, 59 years after he died, "I love you, Pop." I should have said it then. I'm saying it now. It felt strange in my mouth. Decades of not saying it, and then saying it to granite. But something happened when I said it. Not relief, exactly. The regret didn't disappear. The unsaid thing from 1965 is still unsaid in any way that matters to him. But something settled in me. Some piece of the carrying got slightly lighter. I've gone back twice since then, specifically to say it again. Not because once wasn't enough, but because I think the saying is less about delivering a message to him. I don't know if he can hear it. I don't pretend to know. And more about completing something in myself that had been incomplete for 59 years. The words had been sitting in me, unsaid, since I was 23. Saying them, even to a stone, even 6 decades late, let them finally leave me. Let them finally be spoken instead of just carried. I think there's something for you in that, if you're carrying an unsaid thing towards someone who's already gone. You can't deliver it to them anymore, not in any way you can verify. But you can still say it. Out loud, to a stone, to a photograph, to the empty chair where they used to sit. The saying changes something in you, even without them here to receive it. I know that now. I didn't know it until I stood in that cemetery in Millinocket and let the words out after 59 years of holding them in. I want to say something to whoever's listening to this before I close. Something that isn't really about my father at all, though it comes from thinking about him. If your father is still alive, and I don't know how old you are, or how old he is, or what your relationship with him looks like, but if he's still alive, I want you to consider saying some version of these 7 things to him. Not necessarily these exact things. Your history with him is different from mine. But the underlying movement, the understanding of why he worked the way he did, the forgiveness for what he couldn't say, the recognition of what he gave you that you didn't notice at the time, the questions you haven't asked, the pride you haven't expressed, the simple words, "I love you," said plainly, without waiting for the natural moment, because the natural moment may not come, and Tuesday may turn out to be the only Tuesday you get. I carried this regret for 59 years. I don't want you to carry yours for that long, if there's still time to set it down. If he's already gone, if you're past the point where the saying is possible, then I'd say what I've come to believe myself, slowly, over these 8 decades. The saying isn't the only way to give him these things. You can say them anyway, into the air, into a photograph, into the quiet of a morning by a fire, into a granite stone in a small cemetery in Millinocket, Maine. He may not hear it, in any way we can prove, but the saying changes something in you regardless. It did for me in the writing of this. The 7 things are out of me now in a way they weren't before. That matters even without him here to receive it. I want to add one more thing before I close. This conversation has been mostly about my father, but I've realized in putting these 7 things into words that I've also been talking to you, whoever is listening, wherever you are in your own relationship with your own father, living or gone. And I want to say something directly, not as an old man performing wisdom, but as a son who has carried an unsaid love for 59 years and finally found a way to set part of it down. Whatever you haven't said, say it. Whatever you haven't asked, ask it. Whatever silence you've been keeping out of pride or habit or fear of the awkwardness, let it go. The ordinary Sunday you're living right now might be the only Sunday left. None of us get the warning. We only get afterward the long accounting of what we wish we'd said. If anything I said today reached you, you can subscribe to walk with me a while longer. I read every comment. Tell me about your father. Tell me what you wish you'd told him, or what you're glad you did. I'd like to know. Take care of yourself. Say the thing. While there's still a Sunday left to say it in, the fire's still going. I'll see you next time.